Aryan Superman quality. Do you know what I mean? That horrific as it would have been, I would have been okay. I'd have sort of got away with it, just with the blonde hair, being tall.
You're allowed to say
the
that?
eyes maybe would have let me down because I got this bad vision. But
Yeah, you're allowed to say that on the BBC? That you
yeah, I'd
look
have whipped the glasses off as they walked by, so don't worry, I'd have been fine. But, so I'm surprised that anything would attack me health-wise, and yet, Harry, you've looked it up.
Marfan syndrome, yeah, it's a genetic disorder of the connective tissue. People with Marfan's are typically tall, with long limbs and long, thin fingers.
Sound familiar?
You've usually got another affected family member, but 1 in 20,000 births, there's a spontaneous mutation.
An SM.
Now you're thinking, Marfan's, what's it going to do to me? Well, there's little things. There's cysts, there's flat feet, there's hernias. But wait a minute.
It's the most comical of all ailments, isn't it?
No, it gets worse.
Yeah, but what's this? Your cardiovascular system, forget about that. Your lungs, they're gone. Your central nervous system. But famous people have had it in the past. Robert Johnston and Joey Ramone.
This sounds like something they would unleash into CTU in an episode of 24. It sounds horrible.
Yeah,
it's
not
awful.
good.
I'm not sure.
It's not good to be tall. Is this the first time you've
I always
come
thought
face to face with this?
Because people always said I'd love to be tall.
Yeah.
And, you know, and
So they could do well in Nazi Germany.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't
Listen,
think
I'm just looking on the bright side. I'm not.
On the one hand, Marfan, on the other, Nazi Germany.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Retinal detachment.
Ooh.
Imagine that.
Well, your writing has always had an air of retinal detachment.
I would have said
You shouldn't say these things to Steve, though, because as a former housemate of his, I know that he is one of Britain's biggest hypochondriacs.
Seriously.
And we were talking about tapeworm once, and you thought, I remember you said you thought you could contract it just from talking about it. You were worried that you were going to get it. So
I'm pretty convinced.
That would be virtual tapeworm.
The worst kind.
Yes.
Apparently. I'm pretty convinced I've got mad cow disease.
Which what?
Whenever you think about
mad cow.
mad cow disease. Whenever I think, like, even as I'm talking about it now, like, my brain feels a bit soft. You know what I mean? It's sort of, maybe it is psychosomatic. Maybe I've got psychosomatic BSE.
Wow. I thought you said Macau disease, where you have to go gamble in a former Portuguese colony.
If you're not familiar with who we're talking with, it's Harry Shearer. You should be, of course. One of the, I think, is it the only of the Simpsons voices to not receive an Emmy?
That's correct.
Ooh, feel the burn.
So, no Emmy, no Grammy.
Pop round to my house, you'll see one of those glistening in the
Pop round to my house, you'll see one, because I stole one.
You stole one?
I stole an Emmy.
From whom?
From the Emmy people.
Did they just have them lying around?
No, they every year The Simpsons usually wins for Best Animated Show, and the people who win that award are the producers and the writers, not the actors. But so they can get photographed, they bring an actor along, because who wants to take a photograph of writers? Seriously. Yeah. So they always invite one of the actors along. So I came along with them one year, and we all come up on stage, and they hand a statuette to all of us, including me. And then when they troop backstage, they take the statuettes away from the people who are going to have them engraved.
Sure.
And since mine wasn't going to be engraved because I hadn't won anything,
You just kept running.
I just kept ran what? I don't know.
Did anyone in the backstage area just hear a door slam, some feet run down some steps into a car that drives off?
Step on it.
And what would Lenny Leonard have said at that moment?
Good deal, Harry. Get one for me next time.
I wondered. I did wonder.
Yeah, you did. I saw you wondering there just before the Marfan hit you.
Oh, but I suppose if
That's sort of a turnaround when the Marfan hits.
yes.
and if if I am to die of Marfan syndrome, I mean, how would Kent Brockman report that news?
Hold on, wait a minute. Because we need the whole effect. Just talk among yourselves for one moment here.
Coming up on BBC Two, the 412th edition.
I'm Kent Brockman. This just in. Marfan victim Stephen Merchant has met his master.
Listen, we must talk about things other than
Marfan syndrome.
other than Marfan syndrome.
And by the way, it's a serious ailment, so please give.
Absolutely.
Exactly, absolutely. And if you're a fan of Marfan, no, that doesn't make any sense. Are there any Marfan fans? There can't be Marfan
would you
fans.
be a
Marfan
fan of the
fanciers?
disease?
A Marfan fanzine. A Marfanzine, it would be called. They're clever people, these. Now, of course, we talked earlier about satire, and one of the things that's always struck me is that you've always, it strikes me, the things I've read and I've spoken to you in the past, you have quite, I would say, an anti-establishment attitude. Is that fair? I mean, you're obviously very much part of the machine, you know. But
Well, just because I work for Rupert Murdoch, you say that?
Exactly. You know, in the same way that I work for the BBC, the evil corporate BBC. But no, you
I, for one,
but yet there's lots of things, because you're sort of fascinated by sort of the way that I guess the news is presented to us and information is presented to us.
Yeah.
And you've done some quite sort of unusual art installations. is
Yeah,
that right?
I have one that's currently running at a museum in Connecticut in the States, and it's gotten a lot of attention because it's so near New York City. You know, America is this has this thing where in the arts, especially, if New York pays attention to you, then you exist, and if not, you don't.
Yeah,
I guess it's probably the same thing with London and here. So this museum, this exhibition opened at a gallery in New York, and all of a sudden a guy from this museum outside New York came down to see it, and he said, "Can we put it in our museum?" And the New York Times came and covered it, and now it's going to go all over the country. And it's basically, I've been collecting for about 30 years footage of people waiting to go on television. Famous
So
people
how do you
waiting.
access this? So if there's a live broadcast about to happen, let's say we're about to interview, Colin Powell, and he's sat there in the studio, you're getting the live feed.
Sometimes I will get the live feed, yeah. And I had noticed, because when I was working at Saturday Night Live, I would see these feeds coming in at NBC, and it just sort of fascinated me that this is the first time in the history of humankind that so much kind of banal behavior was being perfectly recorded and photographed. And I thought, somebody's got to tape it. And then the same way Dick Cheney chose himself to be vice president, I nominated myself to do the taping. So I've collected all this stuff, and then I thought the only way to really use it is in an so-called art context, because then they can't sue you, because there's nothing at stake.
Oh, is that the way that? So, because I was wondering how you were allowed to get permission to do it.
Yeah, no, there's no permission needed. It's art, you know. So
And if I walk in the gallery, then I'll just see various politicians.
you'll see the people who were involved. You'll see Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Senator John McCain, and a number of American media people as well.
And is it,
Henry Kissinger is there.
And it's them just twiddling, maybe having their makeup done, a microphone adjusted.
Mainly just looking at you, looking at the camera, and it goes on for a fairly long time before it reloads. So.
And is it revealing?
It's very revealing sometimes. The thing, part of what I'm doing it for is because television, when it first started, was supposed to be a really visual medium, and then in the United States, for economic reasons, it's become just radio with pictures.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the basic project is called Non-Talking Heads, which is to make you look at these people differently when they're not yakking at you all the time. You start noticing, little things about them, the way I am about you, Stephen, when you're just doing that obsessive nodding at me.
Sure. I was thinking about my next question. But to be truthful, I didn't have a next question. So then I was thinking maybe I'll just play this.
On 6 Music.
Our guest is Harry Shearer. Apologies for playing that, but it's it was funny, guys. We were looking at it earlier, and we walked in, and we just saw 3 words: "See my vest," and we started laughing. I think that's the power of the show. Yeah. And I think The Simpsons is an extraordinary example of sort of satire that somehow seems to have infected the entire world. Everyone seems to be a fan of that show, and yet, once again, you sort of wonder if it has any impact. The way that it can mock religion, it can mock politics, it can, as you say, it mocks the very sort of fabric of American broadcasting.
Yeah, and yet it remains the same.
It remains exactly the same.
Yeah, religion hasn't changed.
I was
lately.
I was in I was in the States, I think, during the sort of run-up to the election.
You didn't call me then either.
I didn't have your number. I didn't have the details. I thought I had slighted you at some point. I'd just say I'm sort of paranoid. But in fact, I've already lost your number now. You just gave me, so I can phone up for some free merchandise. Look, this is mad. Where's it gone? Doesn't make any sense.
Try your pockets.
This is not even great radio. But yes, during one of I think it was the CNN newscasters, they were maybe I think the results were coming in, and they had holograms of various people. I think at one point Will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas appeared as a hologram, which the newscaster was able to interview. I mean, that is a point that if it featured on The Simpsons, you'd think it was a sort of below par piece of satire.
Yeah, and yet no, it's hard to keep up with how lunatic life is in the United States at this point, and certainly the so-called news channels are a great example of that. CNN spent more money on that hologram effect than they would have to put 2 correspondents in some interesting place in the world for a year and a half, and that's what they do, and they premiered it, I think, right during the political conventions, and they had a correspondent who was in Chicago, at the Obama headquarters or something magically appear in the studio in Washington. You just go, well, so what? Really? Why don't you just put her on the monitor like you always do? But no, she's a hologram. But she wasn't really a hologram because it wasn't really three-dimensional.
You're right, of course, it was just a TV trick.
It was a faux hologram that they spent all the money on.
And do you feel that, because often we think of America as being very proud of its freedom of speech sort of policy, and yet do you ever feel kind of restricted? Did you ever feel restricted on Saturday Night Live or any of the things you've done in terms of what you can say?
No. You know, even during the time, I'm going to stop stuttering in a moment. The time when I think it was most threatened in the recent past was right after 9/11. There was this real chill that fell on the country, and Graydon Carter, the editor of Vanity Fair, famously said, "Irony is dead." I think he was speaking for himself, but still, it was a widely published proclamation. And people were scared of making fun of George W. Bush at that time, as hard as that may be to believe. And Dave Letterman came on after a week interregnum and did his first show, and was very serious and seemed to be, you know, ashamed of being funny at all at that point. And I felt, okay, I don't care. And I did my first George W. Bush piece a week after the show. So, I mean, a week after the show, a week after the disaster.
Yeah.
So I've never felt, and I didn't get nothing came down on me as a result, but I did feel that ambient effect of, ooh, we've got to be serious now. The strangest things happened in America after 9/11. The football games, the American football games are rife with sound effects to hype up the sense of action, you know.
Yes.
So when you see a collision between players, they either mic it or fake it, but there's a sound. And the National Football League announced that out of respect, the first week after 9/11, they would get rid of the sound effects. Out of respect.
But people would just be bursting into tears at the thought of the sound effect.
Yeah, and the sound effect. And all sorts of strange things were done out of respect at that time, you know.
Sort of don't feel is right for satire. Do you have your own sort of...
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can't really seriously make fun of bloody death. You know, that's just over the... But the best example was after the O.J. Simpson murders. One could make great sport and have dine out for years over the circus that evolved around the trial. So that's the distinction, you know, and certainly the way in is always media coverage, because media coverage is always foolish.
Indeed. That was actually quite a sensible and interesting conversation. I'm just conscious of what, say, Rainer Wolfcastle would say about the whole subject.
I would say that perhaps it's time for you to play another song.
Featuring Damon Albarn on keyboards, Ce n'est pas bon, the new single from Amadou and Mariam, of course known as the blind couple from Mali. Steve Show 6 Music, and we'll be saying goodbye to Harry Shearer very soon, but we have the lovely Sammy and her scary father in Newcastle, and he's become something of a legend to regular Steve Show fans because of his extraordinary life, and we're engaging in a sort of Q&A, a true or false game, just to unearth some more of these stories. Sammy, have you got the next one for us?
Yes, when playing in a particular club, my dad is a drummer, he had to wear a crash helmet whilst drumming for protection against glasses and pies because the audience weren't too happy.
Again, I mean, there's no question that's true. I mean, that's obviously the case, am I right?
Well,
yes, it's up to a point. In fact, we had, yes, I had to wear the crash helmet to avoid serious injury from pint glasses and pies, but it was in appreciation of the band, not because they didn't like us.
Right.
And